Hong Kong's Commissioner of Police, Chris Tang, recently departed for Beijing to discuss the ongoing unrest in the Chinese-ruled city, his first such visit since his appointment last month. Now, the Hong Kong police chief has urged citizens to demonstrate peacefully ahead of what is expected to be a large-scale pro-democracy march. Commissioner Tang took office in November with a warning that fake news was undermining the reputation of his police force. He replaced the previous Hong Kong police chief amid a city-wide crackdown against anti-government protesters at the Polytechnic University in Hong Kong that saw some of the worst violence and protests.
To conduct a courtesy call, I'm going to meet with the senior official from the Ministry of Public Security and also the Hong Kong and Macau office of the State Department. During the visit, I'm going to introduce myself, introduce my new management team, and to introduce the crime situation in Hong Kong. And we are also going to discuss about some matters relating to policing of mutual interest.
Well, Tang is scheduled to return early on December 8th, hours before the afternoon rally is slated to commence. Meanwhile, police has given a rare green light to demonstrations organized by the Civil Human Rights Front, the group that called a million-strong march in the summer. The upcoming march is a key system to gauge the pro-democracy movement's support following its sweeping victory in the local elections. And while journalist Laurel Shaw is now joining us live from Hong Kong for the latest on the situation in Hong Kong presently. And thanks very much for joining us, Laurel. And now, one would assume that the police commissioner heading to mainland China is basically stock taking, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically a sign showing to the public and to the world that the Hong Kong police force is still very much in line with what Beijing wants, and that Beijing still very much supports what the Hong Kong police force is doing. This, of course, while many international organizations, including organizations in Hong Kong, continue to call for an independent inquiry into the police force's behavior, with many allegations of abuse of force and even sexual violence.
Right, and of course now what's also interesting, Laurel, is that the police force this time around has allowed a peaceful protest on the same day as the police commissioner returns from mainland China. What do you think is the underlying thinking there?
Well, they have allowed peaceful protests. But previously, they would almost always allow peaceful protests, but over the past 6 months, they have rejected more and more. They do still continue to allow protests to occur, though definitely at less often than before. But as we saw last week, for example, there was actually a sanctioned march on Sunday, and the police actually rescinded the authorization an hour into the march and then used tear gas. So at this point, the authorization almost doesn't really mean much. It really depends what happens on the day. The police very much might still decide to use force, and it wouldn't surprise me if there were still clashes on that day.
Right. Laurel, thanks very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts there. So clearly it will be decided on December 8th whether this will continue to be a peaceful protest, although things have been largely peaceful since the local elections where, of course, the pro-democracy movement swept through.